All right. Yeah, so welcome everybody to our immunomodulating polysaccharides and PhytoSapiens membership webinar. Okay, so we have a few cool things for you tonight. We want to introduce this PhytoSapiens membership webinar, but first we're going to look at some cool stuff about immunomodulating polysaccharides because the way we set this up with the membership is there's a theme each month, right? And the theme comes along with, well, you'll hear about all that in the future. But the theme for February is immunomodulating polysaccharides because we thought, hey, seasonal wellness, lots of viruses around, people catching colds and flus. The IP for short would be a really good set of constituents to really dive into. So first we're going to look at some slides about IP to get, the highlights of how important and interesting they are. And then we'll show you some things we put together for the first month of the membership, and we'll give you a tour of how it's set up and how it works. Okay, so here we go to the slideshow. Okay. Carbohydrates. Let's make that nice and big. Okay. All right. So carbohydrate constituents and their health effects. So the reason we're starting with this is because immunomodulating polysaccharides are a type of carbohydrate, right? And when we think about carbohydrates, the first place my mind generally goes is like, oh, nutritional macronutrients, macromolecules, because starches, for example, are a type of carbohydrates, and sugars are carbohydrates, et cetera. But within that major category, there are phytochemical subcategories with some really interesting biologically active constituents that are in some of our favorite herbs. Okay, so this is the umbrella for immunomodulating polysaccharides. And where we go from here, yeah, that's a hint. Echinacea is the featured herb of the February theme. So that's a lovely young echinacea there. Okay, so I love this long word. I love to say it fast. Immunomodulating polysaccharides. But we can also call them IP. That's a very common abbreviation and a lot easier to handle when you're saying it over and over again. Right? And interestingly, there are many, many, many different types of IP, right? But what they have in common is that they're polymers, big molecules made up of a bunch of small units linked together. And so a lot of them are what we call heteropolysaccharides. And the hetero part means like different, like variety. And that means these are polysaccharides, multiple sugar molecules made up of different simple sugars and their derivatives. Okay, so it's like linking a bunch of sugars together in like big, feathery, complicated branching patterns for most of them. And some of that, we don't even totally know what those patterns are. They're very complex molecules. So much research coming out on them lately that we're starting to like figure out that their big overall complex shapes has a lot to do with their medicinal activity, actually, kind of like with proteins, right? Proteins, the shape of them and enzymes is really important for their function. And a similar thing is happening with these IP, right? So simple sugars that they're made of, arabinose, these are all sugars, you can tell because they end in ose, right? Arabinose, xylose, rhamnose, galactose, et cetera, and sometimes uronic acids, which are derivatives of your simple sugars or monosaccharides. A uronic acid like glucuronic acid is glucose with a carboxyl group bonded to it, and that makes it a glucuronic acid or a carboxylic acid. So those are simple sugar derivatives, and you find those in a lot of your IP. Okay. So that's one subgroup. Another subgroup is the beta glucans, and a lot of you have heard of beta glucans because they're famous in the medicinal mushrooms, and medicinal mushrooms are just so like people are so interested in them now, and there's a ton of research being done on them, which is great. So those, they are classified as immunomodulating polysaccharides, but they're different from heteropolysaccharides because they're made up of all the same kind of subunit. So they're called homopolysaccharides, which is interesting, right? So instead of a bunch of different simple sugars, they're made up only of glucose bonded together in special ways, right? Which gives them their activity. And another word for the beta glucans in general is glucans, because there are a few different kinds of glucans. Okay, so but beta glucans is the way most people refer to those. Okay, so when we're talking about mucilages and inulins, we are also talking about immunomodulating polysaccharides, right? Because immunomodulating polysaccharides is sort of a human referential name for these compounds, right? They're not, that doesn't tell you about their structure, their phytochemical categorization, or any of that. What it tells you is, oh, these are polysaccharides that have an effect on our immune systems, right? So when we go in there and we look, it turns out a lot of our mucilages in our favorite mucilaginous herbs also act as immunomodulating polysaccharides, which is really cool, because as herbalists, first we learn about mucilages, they're soothing, they're cooling, they're hydrating, they can soothe irritated tissues. You can use them with UTI formulas or respiratory formulas or gut healing formulas, all these things, right? But we might not have learned that they also have activity on the immune system, right? So there's a lot of crossover in there. And I love that because when I first learned that about marshmallow, I was like, but wait, it can do that too, marshmallow root, famous mucilage. So you have a lot of your overlap with mucilages and also pectins, by the way. A lot of your pectins are also act as IP, right? And mucilages are complex mixtures, they've got all different kinds of compounds in them. And then inulins, right, which we may not have thought about as IP previously, because we learn inulins from, I think the most famous source is burdock root, right? You do a decoction, a strong decoction of your burdock root, you get a lot of those inulins, which we call prebiotics, right? Because our probiotic organisms or our friendly gut microbes love inulins. They love to eat them and they make good, good metabolites out of them. And that also helps our immune system. So we'll see a little bit more about that coming up. And I was thinking like, oh, inulins, let's see, they're actually classified as oligosaccharides. More coming. So I was like, oh, so we could call them IP, we could call them IO. I just made that up. I don't know anybody who actually does that. But you know me, love to play with words. So far, so good. Kat, Heather, any observations? Anything to add?
Nothing to add so far.
Okay, we'll jump right in. Okay, so IP are routinely found in herbs with immune system activity and also in our adaptogens, which also have immune system activity, right? And I say routinely here because we used to think they were only in a few different things, but the more we started looking for them, we discovered they're really quite widespread in herbs, herbs for the immune system and adaptogens. And so, yeah, they're popping up everywhere and in the medicinal mushrooms also, right? Which are also herbs for the immune system and adaptogens. So example, echinacea, early on, these were discovered in echinacea, and there's quite a lot of research that's been done on those in our most famous immune system plant. So we're featuring echinacea this month. I think I said that already. Okay, so these words, they crack me up, right? Because really there are so many variations on the theme on these molecules in any plant, right? So functionally speaking, you can just go the echinacea polysaccharides or something because it is a complex group. But some of them we figured out what they're made of, right? And that's where a big old word like this comes from. So the first part is glucurano. That's referring to the uronic acid made out of glucose, called glucuronic acid, right? So that's part of the structure. Arabino refers to the simple sugar arabinose. Xylens refers to the simple sugar xylose. These are all natural plant sugars, okay? And then, so you find some of those in there. And then here's another fun one, arabinose, rhamnose, galactose, arabinogalactans, etc. So those words are basically, let's plug simple sugars together in a word and stick an O in the middle. It's like the pseudo-Latin O connector there. Um, so, fun with long words, okay? Complex mixtures. Here's an example of some other plants that have been studied for their IP. That's Eleuthero, right? Eleutherococcus senticosus. And your famous ginsengs, Panax ginseng or Asian ginseng, and American ginseng, the five-leafed one, quinquefolius, and also in Baptisia, which is a really famous intense immune system herb. And surprise, calendula. Like, what does calendula not do? Oh, and it has immunological activity. Calendula blows my mind. There's a really popular naturopathic supplement it's actually called Larix, which is the genus name for the larch tree. And it's a really, for some oddball reason, it's a really rich source of arabinogalactans IP, right? So you can buy that as a supplement. So what are they? So in echinacea, this is really fun. I learned this way back in the day at the Gaia Herb Farm. The levels of immunomodulating polysaccharides are highest in this developmental stage of the echinacea flower, right? Because when I first learned echinacea, I learned to use the roots only. That's what like pretty much everyone I knew was doing back in the 80s, early 90s. So there are IP in the roots, a pretty good bunch of them, but generally speaking, you get a higher concentration of IP in these immature flower heads. Interesting, right? Because there's a lot of echinacea products that are available in Europe are actually made from the areoles, the upper parts of the plant, right? And they get a good dose of IP. But if you want to maximize it, right, when those, these are going to turn pinkish purple, right? So these are baby echinacea flowers just opening up. I can't wait till they come up again. There's hope for spring now. It's like warm, sunny day, came back. But you can harvest these, carefully dry them. You can even eat them. That's what the scientist who told me about this, it's just like, just eat it. It's pretty crunchy, very herbalist type chew. But you can carefully dry them, right? And just like you would any dried herb, or you can freeze them, right? And you can save those IP that way. Okay. So quite a lot in the root, higher concentration in the immature flower head, which is really kind of an interesting bigger lesson, right? Because when you read about constituents and where they are in a plant, you have to realize that's variable according to things like growth stage, right? Or even the soil that it's growing in, or the microbes that are associated with the plant, which also have to do with those herbal constituents, right? Some of those are made by endophytes, bacteria that live inside the plant, right? So there's a lot of factors that you have to think about. It's called variability, phytochemical variability, right? And just because like you read in one study, like this echinacea had this much in the flower and this much in the root, you have to go, well, that was that echinacea. What are the factors that could influence that? So I like to use both, just to cover my bases. I like to use echinacea root and I like to use echinacea immature flower heads. Okay. And then our lovely friend, our summer friend, calendula, our early fall and summer friend, calendula. So many different healing constituents in this plant, right? We used to use calendula back when I was running the herb school of CSCH. We would put calendula in formulas for gut healing, for helping to repair the lining, the mucous membrane, absorptive lining of the gut, with things like leaky gut syndrome, chronic inflammation, autoimmune conditions, etc. Was just a really nice internal. We think of it first for the skin, right? That's what it's famous for, but the inner skin, right, that lines the digestive system and all the rest of the tubes, is responds really, really well to calendula infusion, right? So we know a lot about how IP affect the gut now, right? And how they communicate with the immune system in the gut, right? So it's pretty interesting to think of our friend calendula that way also, contributing to its GI alterative, long-term repairing, right? And rebalancing of function and the immunomodulating effects. So lots going on in calendula. And that's important to keep going back to the context of the herbal matrix, right? Because when we focus in on a particular group of constituents, oh, the immunomodulating polysaccharides, we just tend to maybe get a little tunnel vision there. And you have to remember, these are working in a plant with, possibly even hundreds of active constituents. So this is one important feature of echinacea, but there's a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. And that applies to every plant. So yeah, whenever I'm teaching constituents courses, I'm like, don't forget, this is one important piece of a large puzzle that's going on, right? So Asteraceae plants are really good at accumulating IP. And here's somebody from a different family, right? What is it? Aureliaceae? Did I get it right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So your
Aureliaceae.
ginsengs. Yeah. I know a lot of people say ACA instead of ACE.
Depends on which teacher you had most recently, which of your
I
classmates was the
know.
most outspoken. If you listen to what radio, what country's radio it just
I
depends.
know. Maybe they say it
Right.
different in different countries. I don't know. But anyway, the Aurelia family. So your Asian ginseng, your American ginseng, your formerly known as Siberian ginseng, which is in the same family, they tend to collect a good amount of IP in their roots as well. And I suspect there's some in the leaves too, but I haven't specifically looked at a study that breaks it down, the leaf compared to the root. But the reason I bring that up actually is I've pretty much switched to using ginseng leaf instead of ginseng root if I'm wild harvesting, because I don't want to dig this plant up. It is way, way overstressed. And I mean, like American ginseng sells for like $1,000 a pound. It's ridiculous. So there's a lot of looting going on of ginseng. So whenever I find a ginseng in the woods, I pinch like one leaflet off and I nibble it. And it tastes super similar to the root, actually. It's pretty interesting. So I think maybe that would be a good source. That's my educated speculation.
There are some studies. I mean, there are also laws about harvesting any part of ginseng, but there are certainly studies suggesting, constituents of interest, desirable constituents in the leaf,
Mhm,
depending on which study you look at,
right.
quite significant, as good as, almost as good as, better, etc., and more sustainable.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
haven't kept up with that.
the way
Uh,
I rationalized my herbal interest while in college was through ginseng research. Yeah.
that's cool. Oh, there you go. We need to nerd out on ginseng together sometime. Right on. Yeah, I pinch a leaflet. I ask permission first, and then I like hide the ginseng. That's what I do when I find ginseng in the woods. I'm like, let me fluff this trail up and throw some branches down so nobody will mess with it. Oh, what a fabulous plant. But focus, we have a lot of other things to talk about. So inulins, we're still in carbohydrate world. We have simple sugars, right? We have, hey, it changed itself. That was fun. That Rachel's like, don't forget me. We have simple sugar, we have monosaccharides, disaccharides like table sugar, right? And then when the polymers start getting bigger, you have oligosaccharides. Oligo means short chains of, right? So these are smaller than your polysaccharides. Technically, they're a kind of polysaccharide, but they're the little ones. They tend not to be mucilaginous. They tend to just be kind of thick, right? So inulins are oligosaccharides. They are short chains of linked fructose units, which is really interesting, right? Because the way they're hooked together, we can't digest them. Humans cannot digest inulins, but they go down and they feed the microbes, right? And that's how we get the benefits of them through our beneficial gut bacteria, right? Our microbiome. So they're also called soluble fiber, dietary soluble fiber, and so are your mucilages, by the way. They count as soluble fiber, right? So your Asteraceae plants really feature inulins in their roots. Maybe not all of them, but it's kind of typical of Asteraceae. Chicory, sunflower root. Wait a minute, what's sunflower root? That's what we call Jerusalem artichokes. They're the roots of a Native American sunflower. Burdock, famous one, dandelion, elecampane, which is Inula helenium, and inulins are named after Inula, right? And our friend Echinacea. And I love this because previously to like doing the research for our first month of material for the membership, I wasn't thinking about inulins and echinacea root, you know? I was just like, it wasn't on the radar. And then I started reading some of the latest research papers and reviews, and they're like, inulins, fructans, important immunomodulating constituents. I was like, what? How did I miss that? So that's really interesting to think about them that way too. They feed those bacteria in the gut bacteria. They increase the production of healthy metabolites. One of them is called butyrate. Some people say butyric acid that those make. And those healthy metabolites are super nourishing and balancing and tonifying for the cells that line the colon. Those are short chain fatty acids, is what they are. That's what butyrate is, a short chain fatty acid. Um, and all of this activity of the gut microbes eating the inulins and turning them into beneficial metabolites supports immunity all over the body, systemic immunity, via action on the GALT. That stands for gut-associated lymphoid tissue, right? Gut-associated lymphoid tissue, because we have a lot of immune system action in the gut, right? And it communicates via the lymphatic channels, right? It communicates with all of the lymph nodes and the rest of the immune system, right? So when you keep your gut happy and you keep your gut microbes happy, all kinds of benefits arise, including strengthening the immune system and helping to rebalance the immune response. So you get a good like acute immune response, but it discourages chronic inflammation, right? And chronic activation of immunity. So systemic inflammation, which really helps rebalance with, the type of autoimmune conditions, various ones, and inflammatory bowel diseases, et cetera. Okay, side effects include they help to stabilize blood sugar swings, right? Those inulins are really beneficial for that. And they also help to balance our blood lipids, our triglycerides, and our cholesterol levels, et cetera. And pretty much we think that's through action on the microbes. The more they study the gut microbiome, the more they understand it's involved in every aspect of health. Super important, which goes right back to the old vitalist thing. It's like, get the gut right first, because it's the foundation of health and it's going to help with any other condition you're dealing with, right? Including things you wouldn't think it has anything to do with, like mood balancing, like anxiety, depression, et cetera. It's pretty wild. That microbiome, very important. So these IP called inulins, not only are they like digestive tonics, you could say, or digestive repair, but they're also really important for the gut-brain axis and the whole immune system all over the body. Yeah, wow. Makes you think about food, huh? That's a beautiful chicory flower there at the bottom. So pretty. Oh, which brings us to our medicinal mushrooms. Okay, so we looked at the heteropolysaccharides, which include mucilages, right? And pectins. And we looked at the oligosaccharides, which includes the inulins, which are also called fructans. And now we're going to look at the other subtype of IP, which are the beta glucans, right? And they are featured in our medicinal mushrooms. And pretty much they're in all of them to different degrees. I learned this recently from Shane Schoolman at MycoLove, who knows more about mushrooms than anyone else I ever met in person. And it's like these beta glucans are actually part of the cell wall materials in the mushrooms, right? And he was like, what was the thing that blew my mind? He's like, oyster mushrooms, delicious culinary mushrooms. They're loaded with beta glucans. And I'm like, are you serious? And then he's like, yeah, they're even in those like mainstream button mushrooms. You're getting some. So all of the edible and medicinal mushrooms contain some of these. But the cool thing, this is reishi or Ganoderma, reishi, right? Reishi, Ganoderma. And it applies to the different species and varieties of Ganoderma as far as I know. They are really, really rich in these beta glucans, right? And they also have another important set of constituents called the triterpenes. Okay, that's going to become important in a minute. So when you see that beautiful shiny outside, you are seeing the triterpenes, right? The reishi varnish, but all on the inside, very rich in beta glucans. And if you look at this is interesting because once you dive into this terminology with these things, you'll see this, and you're like, "What are these numbers about?" And it's talking about how the glucose subunits of the beta glucans are hooked together. Like carbon 1 gets bonded to carbon 3, and when you see a picture of it, it all makes sense. So it's talking about those linkages, and it turns out the way that the glucose units are linked together is also important for the function, right? So there's like what kind of sugars are in there, how they're linked together, how the molecules are branched and their big complex shape. All of those things are important for the function of the beta glucans and other IP in general, right? So yeah, shape and function intimately related. Okay, so there's our lovely reishi. There's some North American species of reishi, right? Were you telling me about that, Heather? Were we talking about this recently?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Ganoderma sugae, which is the
Mhm.
one that is named for Suga canadensis. Then
Yeah,
there's
which is
Ganoderma,
what's the
uh,
common name of that tree?
well, I just call it, oh, the tree is a
Is it
hemlock.
hemlock, right?
Yeah, it's not
Hemlock
like it's
tree,
you're gonna
pseudo or
necessarily find it
something.
on that tree, but the
Yeah.
name is in common. So Ganoderma
Mhm.
tsugae and Ganoderma lucidum is I believe like so I'm in New York State, and so we mostly would find Ganoderma tsugae, but going a little further south, and sometimes here you might find lucidum.
Right.
And then there's Oplanatum, which is less flashy and maybe less interesting, the artist conch. But
Yeah.
the red ones are Tsugae and Lucidum.
Yeah. And there's like red reishi and there's black reishi and there's all these different kinds. And it's pretty interesting, but they're all rich in IP, beta glucans. Um, yeah, I'm not a mycologist. I wish I was. I don't know the deep details on the different species and whatnot. But you find them, so we'll get to this when we talk about solubility and extraction, but reishi are really hard, tough mushrooms, right? You have to work to get the goodies out of those. But then we also have our light, fluffy, delicious culinary medicinal mushrooms, right? Like shiitake. We have a bit about shiitake in this month's material, and maitake, and like I said, oyster mushrooms and all the mushrooms. So this is really nice too, because we can just eat our immunomodulating polysaccharides, cook them and eat them, put them in your soups, in your stews, and whatever comes out into the water, I wish I had a nice shiitake stew right now. Um, but that's a really nice option too, right? Because we don't, oh, was that the, did you all bring your shiitake mushrooms?
I did
Oh,
not because I ate mine.
oh, you ate yours.
Yeah, I definitely I
Yesterday, yeah,
put
sorry.
them in a pressure cooker and it was really delicious. So
Oh my goodness. I know
Yes,
shiitakes are
yesterday,
magic.
yeah. We recorded some content yesterday, and Kat and I were twinning with our dried shiitakes, but she ate hers, and
Yeah,
I still have mine.
yeah. I should have brought my reishi with me. I was tapping on the hard reishi, but this is really nice because, you can eat them. You can also get concentrated extracts, but it's like, compared to reishi, which is an amazing medicinal mushroom, it's nice to have a soft culinary option also. Mm. So a little bit about the solubility. Let's see if I made, oops, that's our last slide from the show there. So immunomodulating polysaccharides, generally speaking, are hot water soluble, right? And you may have heard of double extracting your medicinal mushrooms, right? And the reason is that, especially with reishi, those shiny triterpenes, they have very low solubility in hot water. So when you do your hot water extract of reishi, you're pulling those immunomodulating polysaccharides out, right? Or any other mushroom, but you're not getting very much of the triterpenes. So then you do a higher percent ethanol extract, the second part of your double extraction, to get those triterpenes too, right? Because they're both really important sets of constituents for building immunity and discouraging the growth of abnormal C cells. And so you want them both, right? And really good reishi extracts are double extracted, you know? And especially you get those triterpenes from the fruiting bodies instead of the mycelium with reishi. Right? That balance differs with different herbs, but really good reishi extracts will have like hot water extracted IP and higher percent ethanol extracted triterpenes from the fruiting bodies, right? And put in together. And you can taste those triterpenes because they're bitter, right? Which is awesome. They also have that digestive bitter signaling they do that helps calm and relax your nervous system, right? Digestive bitters are parasympathetic activators, right? The rest and digest function of the autonomic nervous system. And when you taste the bitter, which is a really good thing to do, it helps put your nervous system into that relaxed receptive state, right? So that's another thing that reishi is famous for traditionally. It has been used to, calm the Shen, right? Which is like when your spirit and heart and mental functions are disturbed or your mood is disturbed. So it's interesting to think about how that bitter and that parasympathetic activation plays into that traditional use as well. But so what do? You can decoct, you can ideally powder that reishi at home. There's some work. The smaller you get those chunks, the better, right? Because the cell walls, like this is what it says down here, fungal cell walls are super tough. I said super because they have chitin, which plant cell walls don't have. Okay, so you got to work extra to get the goodies out of a hard mushroom like this. Of course, if you're eating your shiitake, you're getting everything in there anyway, and your digestive system is extracting it for you, right? The great extractor. But if you're making medicine out of reishi, say you want to get your pieces as small as possible, which means chop it up, 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 and then grind it, however you can do that. Or, it's a lot of work, but then you hot water extract. This is how you get the maximum extraction. If you can't go all the way to a powder, great. You're just getting a little bit less out. Use the chunks, right? And we traditionally decoct. And in Chinese medicine, which is where we learned about this mushroom from here in the West, they do a long decoction with reishi, right? Sometimes like simmering or even lightly boiling for several hours because that gets more of it out. We have sometimes we do this for fall workshops. We have a tonic mushroom soup recipe that we make. And it's interesting because the reishi, when you are boiling it in a soup or decocting it to add to the soup, it does come out a little bit bitter, right? Even though, triterpenes have low solubility in water, you will still get enough of them out with a long decoction so that you could taste them, right? Because solubility is a spectrum, it's not either or, right? So with a nice long decoction of reishi, you're going to get lots of the IP out or the beta glucans, and you're going to get some of the terpenes, enough to, have that organoleptic experience of like, oh, this is a little bitter. Maybe we should dilute it if it's supposed to be a tasty soup. But, it's kind of interesting to experience the bitter triterpenes that way also. Okay, so these constituents are very polar. Some of you know what that means. Basically, it translates to very water soluble, but you got to work to get them out of the hard mushrooms. Okay, so fun to know some solubility, and that's what's behind the double extraction that we do with reishi. And then if you're, say, this is a very young echinacea flower head, so with our plants for extracting them, they're easier to get out because plant cell walls aren't as tough. So to get the most IP out of echinacea roots, right, I decoct. And then I have an echinacea root decoction. And one other thing about echinacea, it's got another really important set of constituents that also affect the immune system. They're called alkamides. And the subtype of them that you might have heard about is called isobutylamides, right? Isobutylamides or isobutylamides. And those are the tingly, buzzy ones you can taste in your echinacea tincture, right? So a 50-60% alkyl ethanol tincture of echinacea root really focuses on those tingly, buzzy alkamides, whereas a decoction really focuses on the IP, right? And you get some flavonoids in both, mostly in the tincture, right? So what I like to do for my echinacea, if I'm dealing with an immune system challenge, is I decoct and then I squirt my tincture into the decoction, right? So that I'm getting plenty of IP and plenty of alkamides as well. Yeah. You can do that with reishi too. Instead of like going through the whole double decoction process, you can get a tincture and then, or double extraction process, you can get a tincture, really nicely made tincture, and you can decoct your pieces and pour them in together. Yeah. Okay. So that was our tour of immunomodulating polysaccharides. Anything you wanted to add, Kat or Heather?
I don't think so. I'm just really, besides being grateful for the coevolution between plants and fungi, I really am grateful for our allies, and it's really important to consume plants and also respect them. So
Yeah,
there's so much to know, and so many benefits that we can have by just eating functional mushrooms every day, for
right.
our respiratory systems, GI tract, like just preventing various diseases. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, and you know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of the digestive tonic herbs like chicory, dandelion, and burdock, and how you can use those as a sort of, daily health building formula that's also really good for your immune system, right? And some of the adaptogens as well. So we have a lot of fabulous options that nature has created that can help keep us healthy. Fabulous options. And also Jerusalem artichokes. And you do get a bit of inulins in onions and garlic as well, which is fun. Yeah, and in artichoke. So there's a few places you can have your daily inulins. So what I want to do next is jump over and show you some of the kind of the level of information that we've put together for this community, because this is advanced herbalism, right? So clinical herbalists and pharmacists and holistic healthcare practitioners and folks like that could get a lot of value out of this, or formulators and medicine makers and all that. So if you go, I didn't put the exact link in here because it was kind of long or whatever, but if you want to go find out more about this, you can jump over to our herbalconstituents.com, our homepage, and then you'll see at the top courses and calculators. And I put at the top of that information about this membership that I'm going to show you some stuff from. So herbalconstituents.com. All right, this is the part where I attempt to gracefully switch which screen I'm sharing. I think I got to stop share for a minute to do that.
And you might see the term PhytoSapiens as well, the name of the membership. So if you start to see emails or things on social media that say PhytoSapiens, think of us. But think
Right.
of us this week too, because that's when you have the early member deals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my fabulous friend Trey Shapiro, we were like brainstorming and came up with that name one night. And I was like, that is so good. We're PhytoSapiens. Okay. There's a members
That's
hub
okay.
where you go for the community, right? And we have like the community discussion board and the FAQ and all the stuff there. But it pairs with this. It's kind of like if you've taken any of our courses, this should look familiar. It pairs with this course where every month we add information, right? So that's actually what we're looking at now. Coming February the 1st, that's when we've been really putting together some fun videos and PDFs and stuff that we're going to pop in here on the 1st. So first, there's your orientation stuff. I love this picture that you created, Kat. Kat made this. Kat makes our graphics. I just love that. It's like, can I meet that person? Am I that person? Is that the
Yeah,
inner?
that's you, Lisa.
Is that me? That's what I really look like. I'm okay with that. So, we have a contact page. We have the monthly webinar schedule because we have a live webinar every month, like 2 hours with us nerding out on these things. Here's how we can jump over to the community, and I'll show you that. And just kind of an orientation about how the membership works. So we start out with that. So we have a feature called Constituents of the Month, right? And for February, we chose immunomodulating polysaccharides, and we make a video of us talking about it and discussing it. And then I'll show you the PDFs that go with this too. I have that queued up for you, right? So that's a deeper dive into those constituents. We get into a lot of the detail about them. And that's the first week. And then the second week, we have a feature called Herbs of the Month, right? And you get an email every week that goes, hey, constituents of the month, here's the goodies, right? And then you can pop or you can pop in here and check it out. So the second week we post herbs of the month, and these are herbs that feature those constituents, right? So if we click on that, let's see what happens. Yay, herbs of the month. So here, herbs of the month, immune tonics and stimulants. And what we do is we feature one herb, like echinacea this month, and then we have 4 other interesting herbs or mushrooms that we also talk about. Exactly what's in there, how it's a little special or different, what the mechanisms of action are, what the studies say about it, things about solubility and extraction, etc. So it is herbs of the month, but it's kind of like a constituents focused herbs of the month, right? I'll pop back to the modules. The third week is called the In the Lab, or the Herbal Constituents Lab. And I'm so excited. We're going to make the video for this Monday, right? And that's when we actually get into my herb lab and do some demonstrations that illustrate some of these concepts we're talking about, do some different kinds of extractions. We have a recipe for you. And just some fun, like hands-on stuff. That's kind of like the lab that goes with the course, right? And then we have the fourth week. These go together, actually. We have the live webinar with Q&A. So as you're, going through this material for the first 3 weeks, you'll be like, wait a minute, I don't quite understand this, or look at this interesting thing I did, or, anything you want to share with the community. We'll have a bit of a presentation, but it's a lot of an opportunity to clarify things, go over things, nerd out on things, have discussions about things. And during that live webinar, we also take a bit of time to look at a particular scientific study that's about this topic or about the monthly theme. And there are so many good ones now. There's so much research done on IP. It's really exciting. And I have like about 5 studies that I want to do for February. And I'm like, you must pick one. So I'm still kind of flipping between some of the really interesting ones. But we will have that ready for you. And that's the fourth week content that releases. So this is the pattern that we follow in general, the monthly theme, and then constituents, herbs, right, in the lab with those herbs and constituents, and then the webinar with the study of the month. Yeah. And meanwhile, this is sort of this is like, what do they call it? Evergreen, perennial. This is always there. It's our resources library, right? So let me see if I can get into that. Yay, coming this weekend. Oops, I need to update that because I actually started building this for you, for the members. So I started out with a general resources library where I put all these the big lovely books, little short book reviews about different pharmacognosy books and just really, really handy books for people who want to dive into this level of clinical herbalism and safety, the nerdiest. I love that book. Ooh, it is seriously nerdy. Yeah, just really helpful publications that Heather, this would be a fun, spontaneous moment to talk about the fundamentals of
I knew
pharmacognosy.
you were going to call me out
Did
on
you
that.
know I was going to do that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
I called it the probably because I
you'll see
haven't
this
seen
list
that book in a
grow.
while.
It was, I get a lot of messages from Lisa. So I added 2 to the list just for variety, but not too many to not keep us up. So this fundamentals, it's I brought a few over. It's not too hefty, but it's also not too deep. They try to cover a lot, so some parts look a little bit silly, but it is one of many that I have. They
Yeah,
kind of
and
try to
it's super
encapsulate,
affordable.
yeah, and they kind of try to encapsulate like modalities of alternative medicine that will probably make a lot of people here chuckle or offend us, but it's not too intimidating on the pharmacognosy part. So
It's
it's
a
one
nice
of
intro
many.
book.
I
Yeah.
just knew that you probably hadn't included it, so I was like, well, that will be original.
Yeah. Anyway, so every month we build on this, our resources library. So this is just like the starter that's up there already. Because I was like, some people have already signed up for this. I don't want them to have nothing to look at. I'd better get this up there, you know. But that's under recommended reading. And then every month we add to our resources library on the monthly theme. Right. So I just started putting some stuff in the immunomodulating polysaccharides unit. Okay, so this is going to expand pretty rapidly.
There is already a ton to look at for the membership. And any of you who are in the herbal constituents 1 and 2, you've probably seen that or really it's Kat and Lisa, and I just do a little peripheral support, have produced like videos, study guides, narrative, things to read. It's definitely not slacker on the content aspect. There's a lot available.
Yeah, that's true. And we try to make it fun and just reach all styles of learning so that it just really helps you understand the material. Some things I just personally would need like a visual on, like, what does that bond look like? What is that functional group and why does that matter? So it's nice to have visuals.
So I had one more thing I wanted to share with you. How are we doing for time here? Oh, we're awesome. Which is some of the materials that we put together, the written materials. Let's see if I can. Yay! Here it comes. Okay, this is working so well right now. Oh, go. Okay. So this is Constituents of the Month, which is our first week's material. And there's a video that goes with this, right? Immunomodulating polysaccharides, a functional perspective. Because really, we want to know, how do I use this, right? As a practitioner, what do I need to know as a formulator, a pharmacist, a naturopathic physician, functional medicine doctor, right? Clinical herbalist. We want to know things. You're like, okay, the chemistry is interesting, but let's keep it in the context of actually using these things, right? So I always have that in in mind when I put this stuff together. So let's see, please advance properly. Yay. So I start out with an overview and then, some things about the structures and the subcategories so we can, have a context to locate these things in. And then for those busy moments, we have key takeaways, right? So, just the condensed version of the entire work here, and things about the actions, the solubility, clinical applications, etc. And then we dive pretty deep into each of those categories. Here it's distinguishing heteropolysaccharides from homopolysaccharides, which we introduced a little bit, right? Here's the details that I was telling you it goes into. And then fructans, what are they? Inulins, section on polarity, solubility, and extraction, which is really fun to know if you're a medicine maker or formulator, or also for judging, the quality of your extracts, right? Or your herbal products that you buy, because you want to know that they were made correctly. So that gives you some tools for judging. And then the pharmacological actions, like how do these, what do we know about what's happening on a cellular level, right, or a tissue level in the body? So immune modulation, anti-inflammatory effects, prebiotic and gut immune axis, anti-axis, yes, antiviral and anti-tumor activity, etc. Energetics, clinical applications. It goes really deep. And this one doesn't have tons and tons of references, but I picked out some really juicy, publicly available scientific reviews for you that you can download and read more about. So that's a typical constituents of the month, right? And when I was learning about materials for memberships, everybody was like, don't overwhelm people with too much stuff. And I'm like, is this too much stuff? But you're not obligated to memorize all of it. But if you really want to deep dive into these things, I didn't want to disappoint anybody. So we made it pretty detailed. And then here's what a typical herbs of the month would look like. So common herbs and medicinal mushrooms with immunomodulating polysaccharides. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a featured herb here, like the rock star, the diva, that we go into in quite a lot of detail. But we also have these short takeaways about the 5 different herbs. So we decided to go with Echinacea, astragalus, the famous astragalus, Althea officinalis, marshmallow, our favorite mucilage herb or famous mucilage herb, mucilaginous herb. And then here are your 2 medicinal mushrooms that we looked at in a bit of detail, your reishi and your shiitake, right? So you can see that there's just like, a lot of details about what's in that individual herb, what we know from scientific studies about how it works on a cellular level, how these constituents in this herb contribute to the actions and the energetics of the herb, right? So that's a pretty fun way to look at it because, as herbalists, a lot of us are familiar with the actions and the energetics of echinacea, but now we can go, oh, this is what the IP are contributing to that synergistic profile, right? And then the same, but a little shorter with the other herbs. So astragalus and its special features and constituents, marshmallow and its special features and constituents, Ganoderma, and lentinula, the shiitake. So that's how, it's not a typical herb monograph, right? Because excellent ones of those exist in a lot of other places. But this is more like, what are the constituents up to in that herb? And how does that herb, feature those constituents? Or how do the therapeutics of that herb, how are they based in these constituents? So it's kind of fun thing to add to your other herbal materia medicas. And then with this one, I kind of went a little nuts with the references. So, if you're developing a lecture or you really need to know more about this in a lot of detail, I picked out 20 excellent full text scientific studies and reviews that you can, and link them so you can download those from PubMed for further information. Okay. Yep, I had a good time doing this. Talk about some late nights. So what we do with this, let me jump out of that and show you one more thing because I wanted you to see the members hub. Here it is. I found it. Okay. So, there's the course that we looked at, right, where we add the material every week. And then this is kind of your central depot for like, oh, how do I do this? Where do I introduce myself? You can download a mobile app if you're going on your mobile. And then this is a repetition of what I said, and you can jump to your course from here too, right? So if you want to go back to where we were just looking at constituents of the month or whatever, you can jump there. There's links for the live webinar that we have, which are handy. And then we have frequently asked questions, where do I find this? How do I do that? So we tried to, and we're adding more to that soon also. So that's, kind of a helpful way for you to get around. And then this is where you go. And this might look a little different when you get into it, because this is like my admin type view, which is taking a long time to load. Here it comes. But this is where our community discussions are. So you can come here and be like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I do this, and this is why I'm interested, and let's talk to each other. And you can also drop questions in there for us, right? Because we look at this every day, and it lets us know when you've added a question, right? So the idea, with a lot of membership communities, sometimes it gets a little boring after a while because people aren't actually having conversations. And we're like, let's avoid that. Let's keep this type of forum, let's keep it really going and talk to each other a lot in it. And then, at our live webinars, we can also actually like be in a virtual room together and interact that way as well. Because, yeah, I mean, how fun is that to have a bunch of people interested in herbal constituents at this level together that we can share? And you know what? I didn't check this. We asked people if they had any questions that they wanted to bring up for this webinar. And there was nobody that put one in here for this webinar, but for all the future live webinars, if you're going along, like learning and studying your material and discovering things, and you're like, wow, I need to ask them about this, you can drop it in there. And then we'll have those questions ready to talk about in the live webinars. Yeah. So that's pretty much the tour of the course there. And let me show you one more thing, actually. This is our website, and I put a thing right there where you can jump over to, this is where you have where you buy courses and calculators and stuff. So this is like our store page. And I put a little bit more information about it here. And then if you decide that this is cool for you, then you can either have a monthly subscription, sign up for a monthly subscription, or a yearly subscription, which is a super good deal because you pay for 10 months and you get 12. And until February the 1st, these are the founding members discounts, right? So you get a substantial discount on the membership, and that discount lasts forever, right? So when you renew next year or next month, it's still going to be the same price, right? And we felt like doing that to make it more accessible, more affordable for people. So after February 1st, those prices do go up a little bit. I think that was my list of things to talk about. Anything else, Kat, Heather, before we open up the Q&A?
I think it was a good overview, and I think we covered everything that I had on my list, so well done.
Awesome.
Nice. And
Awesome.
it maybe was going to come up in the Q&A, but I just want to emphasize certain types of materials are released per week. It doesn't mean you
Mhm.
have to do them that week or look at them that week. Everything will be available for at least a few months. Some things will make way to make room for the new topics, but
Yeah, let me add a little detail to that. Thanks for bringing that up. I forgot to say that. Um, the resources library is always there and it's always growing. But the weekly contents are up for 3 months. And then at any time you can download them and save them, right? So, we can't just keep adding and adding like massive amounts of data to the system. It'll freak out. So your videos, totally downloadable. You can download and say, if you have any trouble with that, Heather will help you. And all of the written stuff, download it and save it. And then you can, what I do with my online courses is I have one of these, right? This ain't my first rodeo. That's my own sticker. And I did vote. An external hard drive. They're not that expensive. And I put, whenever I have online courses, I download all the materials and I put them on one of these because those videos get big, right? You don't want to just like put them on your computer. After a while, your computer's like, I'm stuffed with data. So you have 3 months every time something new appears to download it and save it, and you can keep it that way.
Thank you for joining us for this PhytoSapiens webinar. We warmly welcome you to contact us through the herbalconstituents.com website if you wish to ask more questions before deciding to sign up for our PhytoSapiens membership. We are more than happy to help you.